Galera do canal, me chamo Julien e o vídeo de hoje vai falar tanto da dolarização como também sobre os Brics. Eu resolvi trazer um programa estadunidense, também trouxe um programa indiano, mas já deixe seu like e inscreva-se no nosso canal para ajudar na divulgação e valeu!
Another subject that's getting some attention this week is what I'm now told is de-dollarization. That is the question about whether the U.S.'s reserve currency is at least losing market share. There's a report on the Bloomberg that actually last year it lost market share at 10 times the rate that was the average over the last 20 years. Should we be concerned about the U.S. dollar's position as the reserve currency for the world?
David, first, with great respect to the Bloomberg organization, losing share at 10 times the previous rate is a classic how to exaggerate with statistics thing. If it was only losing a share at a tenth or 0.2% a year, then 10 times in the previous year wouldn't prove anything at all. I think the lesson of history is clear. We might have the dollar lose its status, but if we do, it will be the least of our problems. If the dollar loses its status, it will be because the United States is no longer respected and strong in the world. It will be because we've accumulated a set of untenable debts. It won't be because we were doing everything right and remaining a global superpower and people just tried to move out of the dollar. Where are they going to move? Are they really going to hold large quantities of assets in RMB? There has never been a country where there was as strong a desire to move as much capital out of the country as we're seeing in China right now, albeit blocked by controls. Is that really going to be a place where people are going to decide they want to hold reserves on a massive scale? I have to say, David, I doubt it. I think we should concentrate and focus on our fundamentals, our national strategy, and if we're successful, we'll be okay with respect to the dollar.
Larry, we heard from your successor as Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen this week in a major address on U.S.-China relations, in which she talked about taking steps to protect our national security without intending necessarily to hurt the economic situation. What did you take away from what she had to say and where that's pointing us in U.S. relations with China?
I admire Secretary Yellen, and I think the tone of her speech was very much appropriate. There's a phrase in the export control community, small garden, high walls, that I think captures exactly the philosophy that you need to figure out what absolutely needs to be restricted and restrict it strongly and not try to go after everything else. We have renounced new trade agreements as a major tool of strategy. We have declined to reduce tariffs, even where reducing tariffs would improve the competitiveness of our exports. And we just aren't providing resources to the world on the scale that the Chinese are.
Stories about the dollar. It seems China has declared a war on the greenback. Beijing is striking deals, strengthening trade ties, and asking partners to switch to the yuan to settle their bills. First, Brazil made the switch. Now Argentina has entered the club. Argentina will use the yuan for trade with China, and they'll start this month. They're getting $1 billion worth of imports in the month of April, and the payment for this will be done in the Chinese currency. But why is Argentina doing this? Let me explain. This year, Argentina suffered a crippling drought. Crop yields were less, so agricultural exports plunged, which meant that fewer dollars were flowing into Argentina, and so it makes sense for them to use the yuan for Chinese goods. This way, they save their dollars and their reserves. And China is not complaining. One more country using the yuan is good news for them. There is clear momentum behind the Chinese currency. Look at the numbers. Last year in 2022, the international usage of the yuan rose by over 26%. Over $6 trillion worth of payments were settled in the Chinese currency. The yuan has become the world's fifth largest currency for global payments. It comes after the dollar, the pound sterling, the euro, and the Japanese yen. It is also the fifth most held currency in global foreign exchange reserves. Around 80 central banks keep the yuan in reserve, and more banks are joining the list. Last year, a survey threw up some interesting results. It said more central banks in the world want the yuan in their reserves. How many? 85% of the world's central banks. They either have the yuan already or they're interested in building a yuan reserve. So clearly the Chinese currency is emerging as a challenger to the US dollar. And today a new report backed this trend. The dollar suffered another setback. In the month of March, the yuan became the most widely used currency for cross-border transactions in China. And this is a record. Almost $550 billion worth of yuan was exchanged. It was used in almost 49% of all transactions done with China. The trajectory looks good, but the yuan is far from becoming the world's go-to currency. This is the list of the most used currencies. And where do you see the yuan here? Near the bottom. The 8th most used currency in the world. Not even 2% of international payments are happening through the yuan as of now. The dollar still reigns supreme. In the month of January, it was used for over 45% of all global transactions. So the yuan is a challenger, but not a threat as of now. In order for that to happen, the yuan needs to beat currencies like the euro, the pound, and the yen. But that doesn't mean that the de-dollarization campaign is not real. Other currencies are rising. Countries want to reduce their dependence on the US dollar. Central banks are cutting back on the greenback. Earlier, the dollar had 71% share in reserves. Now it has fallen to 59%. That's a fall of 12%.
Então, ambos os vídeos mostram que o dólar é a moeda principal, claro, mas a visão americana é que o dólar vai continuar sendo soberano se os Estados Unidos for forte. Já a indiana mostra que apesar do dólar ser a moeda principal, existem outras moedas que estão tomando uma parte do mercado. E talvez, com o tempo, essa parte do mercado se torne ainda maior, ou seja, a desdolarização. Mas veremos nos próximos capítulos o que vai acontecer no mundo nos próximos anos. Mas já deixe seu like, inscreva-se no nosso canal para ajudar na divulgação e valeu!